Retired Revenue Officer McGarry here, and we are talking Tax Smart. Today I want to cover a topic that is in the news quite a bit. It's in the news quite a bit because the Biden administration has made the statement that he is going to forgive the debt of tens of thousands of college students who have taken out federally guaranteed loans in order to pay for their education, and then they have turned around and not made payments, defaulted on their loans, and as a mechanism for, I'm going to say, my opinion is that as a mechanism for his being able to garner votes amongst young people, that he has stated that he has the ability to forgive those loans. Now that's been challenged. It was challenged, and the Supreme Court said the executive branch to simply not have the authority to do that. And he basically said, I don't have to listen to the judicial branch. I'll do what I want to do. And so he has instructed the Department of Education, who is responsible for the administration of federally guaranteed student loans, to forgive billions of dollars in debt. So that's the scenario. So here's the thing. As normal, and this has the potential for me to go off into the weeds in a lot of different areas. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to be as factual as possible so that we have clarity. But as usual, the Biden administration and the media and various others have misrepresented the facts. And so what I want to do today is just basically clear up some of those misconceptions so that people understand what's going on. So at the foundation of what we're talking about is the idea that you have taken a loan. So you have signed a contract stating that you're going to borrow X number of dollars and that it's going to be paid back, and you have terms of repayment. And as long as you abide by those terms of repayment, then your loan is valid and there's no problem. Now, in order for many people to get a backing for their education, they turn to applying for federally guaranteed loans, which gives them a better opportunity because the loans are normally at a lesser interest rate, and the government is basically saying, if the individual reneges on paying their loan, then we will back that. The federal government will back that, and we will pay that. So what's at the heart of this? What's at the heart of this is that these loans that you get that are federally guaranteed are still loans. They're loans which are being made by lending institutions who give the loans because there is the federal backing. And so normally when you pay back a federal loan, they have provisions for situations that come up where you may not be able to pay things off as quickly as possible. And they have provisions set up in the agreements with the students that you pay it back over a certain period of time, and if you can't pay it back as much, they can make arrangements. So they try to be very amenable in how it is that they make this possible. But if you fail to pay back your loan, then a couple of things are going to happen. Number one, the loan is federally guaranteed. So the person who is getting the loan, if they fail to make their payments and they are in default, then what's going to happen is that lending institution is going to basically send creditors information that you have defaulted on a loan, and your credit rating is going to be in the tank. So all of these people that have borrowed money with the idea that they were going to get an education, and then they turned around and they got their education, and then they failed to keep their part of the deal and to start paying back that loan that they borrowed in order to get their education, if they've defaulted, their credit rating is going to be seriously affected. Now, I may in a later video do just as a bonus video, a video talking about the elements which are present that affect your credit rating. But I would dare say that as a young person, if you're trying to establish credit, you need to understand that you need to protect your credit rating at all costs, because there are several factors. There are 5 or 6 factors, as I remember correctly, that affect your credit rating. And that credit rating follows you through life. When you're trying to buy a home, when you're trying to buy a car, when you're trying to buy anything having to do with credit, you are pulled up and looked at, and there are factors which will make it nearly impossible for you to find a bank that will back you. One of them is that you have defaulted on an existing loan. So, I'm just going to put out there that that is not a good thing. You should never default on a loan. Basically, you are stating, when you borrow money, you are stating that you have the ability and the desire and the drive to make sure that you pay back the loan under the terms of the contract. When you fail to do that, you have demonstrated that you cannot be trusted. And so your rating that is given to you as a credit rating then suffers because of that. And that can follow you through life. The second issue here is that, so what happens? So the bank notifies the credit bureau that you've defaulted on your loans. The bank wants its money. That's what they're concerned about. And say they go to the guarantor. Now, in simpler terms, you may understand this like when when your child is first entering into the loaning market, and they want to buy a car, and they can't buy a car on their own. They need a co-signer. And so they come to you and they say, Mom and Dad, would you please co-sign so that I can get this car, so that I can have a vehicle for transportation? So you go, sure, because you're a child. So you go, oh, sure, okay. So you co-sign the loan. What if your child defaults on that loan? If your child defaults on that loan, then the bank is going to come after you as a co-signer because they want their money. They loaned their money out. And so what happens in that case is that you then have to pay back what it is that you guaranteed, that you co-signed for. I used to tell my kids, and I've got 3 kids. I did this for all 3 of my kids to get them started, but I warned them ahead of time. I will co-sign for you because you are my children. But I'm going to tell you this. You default on any payment of this contract for your car, that car is now mine. It's just that simple. I'm going to guarantee that they're going to be taken care of, but you default on it, and that car is now mine. So what happens in real life is that the bank is going to contact the federal government, the Department of Education, with whom you went through in order to get this loan, and they are going to guarantee that you get paid. And so then then you will owe the Department of Education, and they will come after you for the amount that you owe. In loan forgiveness, what happens is that in this case, the Department of Education is saying, this loan that you took out, you can't pay it back. We guaranteed it. We're going to pay it. Now we're coming after you. The Biden administration has instructed the Department of Education to say, no, we're not coming after you. We're going to forgive what it is that you owe. So let's think this through for a second. The reason the executive branch doesn't have the power to do that is because it's not their money that they're playing around with here. If the government guarantees a loan and has to pay it because you've defaulted on your loan, then it is the American taxpayer who is paying for your education. It is the American taxpayer who is paying for your irresponsibility. And so that's the first element. And that, like I said, that's a weeds issue, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. But what I am going to say is this, is that there are consequences attached to actions. And the first consequence I've already talked about. Your credit rating is going to be in the tank. The second consequence that many people are not aware of has to do with really kind of what this channel is all about. This channel is about helping to understand the dynamics of the Internal Revenue Service and our tax code and how our tax code operates. And under the tax code, what have we stated a lot, and will continue to state, is that the feeling of the government is, if you're going to play, you got to pay. And so what the government is saying in that is that they want their take. Now, we went over a couple videos back, where we talked about the fact that the Internal Revenue Code says all income is subject to taxation. So what happens with a loan? So when you borrow money to buy a house, when you borrow money to buy a car, when you borrow money to buy a boat or an RV or whatever, when you're borrowing money, what's happening is you're basically taking out a loan, and that is not taxed. The income that you get from that loan is not taxed, because the understanding is that the loan is going to be paid back with money which has been subjected to taxation. So you're paying back the loan with income that you've received that you've already paid tax on it. And therefore, you don't have to include the amount of your loan into your income when you receive the loan, because it's going to be paid back over a period of time. So let's think that understanding through, because what that's really saying is what happens then when you have what's called loan forgiveness. And debt forgiveness, or loan forgiveness, is when you then have owed somebody money, you have defaulted on your loan, and now so then they forgive that loan. They're not going to come after you. There are some places where there will be provisions made to try to come after you, but if they outright forgive it, then what happens is the law says that amount that they forgive, the loan that you took and never paid back, so the remaining balance is forgiven, that now is going to be reported to you on a 1099 as debt forgiveness. And the year in which that happens, you now have income, because the loan was never taxed and the government wants its money. So let's say, for example, just as an example, since we're talking about student loans, let's say that I'm a student, I default on my loan, I have debt forgiveness afforded to me by the Department of Education, and I owed $120,000 on my loan, which they guaranteed and paid off. I would receive a 1099 telling me that I had debt forgiveness in the year that it happened for $120,000. That means that I would have to add into my income for that year the $120,000, and then I would have to pay tax on that. The only provision that is within the law for not having to include that into income and pay tax on it is if I can prove to the Internal Revenue Service that in the year that that happened, I was insolvent. A term meaning that I was upside down and I had more debt than asset, more debts than assets. So I could petition to the Internal Revenue and say, let's say it happened in 2023. I could petition to the Internal Revenue and say, in 2023, I was insolvent and I had more debt than asset, and therefore this additional debt forgiveness cannot be added to my income. That's a hard sell. You have to be able to put together documentation just the same as if you were filing for bankruptcy, proving what your assets are, proving what your debts are, and be able to show that in fact you were insolvent. So what's not been talked about here by the media and the government and all, what they're trying to get people to do? And I promise not to go into the weeds here, but what they're trying to get people to do is to say, wow, I had my student debt forgiven. And so because I had my student debt forgiven, I love the Biden administration. And I'm definitely going to vote Democrat. The reality of it is that nobody has talked to you about the fact that what it's going to do to your credit rating when you default on a loan that you took out and you've said to the banking industry, basically, I'm irresponsible. Nobody talks to you about the fact that debt forgiveness is taxable in the year that it happens, and that income now has to be added in to your additional income, and you're going to pay tax on that. And by the way, there are no provisions for removing that tax liability because of the fact that you've got now all this income. And I can guarantee you that you're going to be paying a lot of money on taxes depending upon how much it is forgiven. So I hope this provides a little bit of insight into what the law actually says and what will actually happen. And I do not look at debt forgiveness as a good thing, whether it's coming from a bankruptcy or it's coming from other circumstances, or in this case, it's coming from a source that has already been told by the judicial branch of our government that they do not have the authority to do that, even though they're doing it anyway. So, what's the moral of this story? Remember that as far as the government is concerned, and the Internal Revenue is the arm which enforces federal tax law says if you're going to play, there is a consequence and you will pay. I hope this has been helpful.